For those who don't know, this is Ken Blackman. Ken Blackman is my husband. I'm thrilled to have him. It's funny because Ken and I, when we first started seeing each other, he lived in a different state and I lived in a different state. And so he and I talked a lot, either on the phone via text or via Zoom. And so this morning when we got on Zoom, we're together, but he's in the other room doing this. I had a visceral recollection of what that was like when I saw him. And it's really, hi, it's good to see you, my husband.
Hi.
So for those who don't know, Ken, Ken is a sex, intimacy, and relationship expert, and he has a very unique perspective about that. He's had a very different, very out of the box, very non-traditional training over the past 20 or more years, and I'm going to have him on for a different episode or different show to talk about all the nuances and sort of some of the richness that he's learned himself throughout it and how it can help. What are the pitfalls, et cetera, et cetera. But that's who he is. Ken, do you want to add anything else about that? Am I missing
Nope.
something? So that's the kind
It
of,
all will be revealed as we
yeah.
go.
And so that's the kind of background and who he is and what he brings to, our relationship. And then Nat Thiel is a dear friend of ours. In fact, we didn't have very many people at our wedding at all, and she was the only person like in there. So she was there at our wedding, and I did a training, and she was my coach, and just like an exceptional, remarkable human being, soul, wise. Um, when I think about the kind of woman and coach and listener, I've said this to you, Nat. I think about modeling myself after Nat with my own flavor. If there's something that you want to add to that.
No, I don't think so, other than how warm and what's the word? Uh it's really special that you call me Nat. Actually, there's very, very few people on the planet that give me that nickname, and they tend to be the closest, more intimate ones. And so it means a lot that you even just introduced me as Nat. I'll say that.
All right, I'm just going to start crying from the first moment that we start this thing, and that's perfectly fine. I wanted to have this conversation specifically because first I wanted to just model what a great or good or successful relationship with someone who has personality adaptations. I'm a triple winner. I have narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and schizoid personality disorder, and some other ones just for good measure, like panic, and I've had all kinds of stuff. So I'm through the looking glass of all of that enough to have a coherent, cohesive self and be I have a self in order to be self-aware enough. Where it's not the chaos and pain and strife and struggle and roller coaster ride that those relationships typically produce. And I wanted to talk about what it looks like from the inside out, how we do things, what we do. If people who are listening to this are in relationship with someone who has any of these adaptations, or are trying to figure out how to actually, let's say you have someone who has an adaptation like this, but you have some self-awareness and you're trying to figure out how to do relationships better. This is the conversation to listen to and to have. And if you have questions, like bring them on. I might end up doing a series about this, but that's basically why I wanted to start this conversation and actually like have you all have an insight of what it is. I'm going to hand it over to Nat. Nat's going to ask questions. We're going to go on this like conversational ride, and then we'll go from there. And feel free to pipe in while you're listening and ask questions, and we'll move on. So Nat, I hand it over to you.
That's great. And I feel really honored to be a part of this conversation, and equally deeply curious, because I am I am one of the people you just described. I had some of the closest people in my life have various personality adaptations, both, you know, past romantic partners and also in my immediate family. And so I'm curious on how this meanders. And really, you know, I'd like to immediately really turn it to both of you, and Ken or Anna, either one of you can start. I'm just curious, how does this show up for you? How does this work in your relationship, both in the beginning and how it's also morphed throughout time?
Do you want to answer? Or do you want? How do you want to?
You take it. You take it first, and then we'll go from there.
I love that question because it gives space for like growth and how it looked at the beginning and then how it ended up.
Yeah,
how
what's
it is
the
right now.
the transformation and the
And how it
morphing?
was. Yeah. So, you know, I talked about how so I had known of Ken. Ken is well known in his circles. And I'd known of Ken for a number of years and reached out to him to do a live Facebook, a conversation, like a podcast conversation about sex and sexuality and relationships, et cetera, et cetera. And we ended up talking. I never actually used our first recording, but I became interested in him and started to talk to him. I was like, I like this person. I'm going to start talking to him. And that started to happen. And we were sort of flirty and we liked each other, but we didn't really acknowledge it. I was always interested. He was always interested. Is that correct, Ken? You were sort of interested from the beginning.
Absolutely, I was.
And then we did another live conversation where people could actually ask questions during that time. And at that point, it was pretty clear that he and I had chemistry. And then I started talking to him. Long story short, as we started to like get to know each other, some of my more, and tell me if I'm right, Ken, some of my more narcissistic personality adaptations started to show up. I started to get like very entitled to him and his time. I just like knew that he was mine and didn't understand why he wasn't falling in line. Was adamant. What else was I like, Ken?
You know, we've taught. It's funny. So I'll just kind of give you the roadmap. We were attracted to each other, and we were definitely having interactions where we were building something. Then we hit a road bump that almost broke us up. Then we got past it and got into the territory that both of us wanted to get into. And that particular road bump, we've talked about a bunch of different times in a bunch of different ways. And I recently had a thought about it that I don't think we've talked about. So I'm going to say what I now believe, like how I would describe it, and you can tell me if you think how accurate this is. So, first of all, you were very skilled in getting the things that you wanted, but a lot of the things that you do weren't going to work on me. And so it was like I had the good fortune to know every trick in the book. So all the things that like you were trying really hard, but I was unmanipulatable.
What's an example? I'm curious what an example of that was in this instance.
Like, well, she would say something of the nature of, you're mistreating me because you're not doing this and this and this. And I would say, well, I'm not obligated to do that. We haven't established we haven't established that that's what I'm even supposed to do. No, I'm not going to do that without feeling guilty about it. Or yeah, it was that kind of thing. And mostly what I felt, I'll say one more thing. Mostly what I felt was, so I was attracted to her. I was drawn to her. But mainly what I was getting was, what was missing from, I'll say it, what was missing for me was who she was as a human being, as opposed to what her wants and needs were that I was the perfect person to fulfill.
Okay.
And so mainly what I needed was, who is this person, and what, like, I knew she was an amazing human being, and there was a period of time during which I wasn't getting that. And so I had kind of the self-worth to hold out for, no, I am not going to move forward until you start showing me the person in there that I know is in there.
I want to answer the question about what I did, but then I want to go back to what you were going to say that has changed now that, you know what I mean? You were going to say like
Yeah.
now. So what I would do was in the beginning, we were just like hanging out and talking, right? We were just like getting to know each other. And then as he became more valuable to me, as he became more important to me, as I became more like clear that I liked him and wanted him, et cetera, I started to charm and seduce and manipulate and be like, you know, like do all the stuff that we do when we're trying to get someone's attention, get someone to pay attention to us, like get more. And he just didn't have
I was like,
I didn't have any patience for any part of that shit.
because it wasn't, all these things that were so charming and alluring were not the thing that I
Yeah.
could see exactly why they would be so attractive. They were not the things I was looking for or interested in about her.
Yeah. And then when that didn't work, when I was trying to do all the seductions, then I just was like flat out like giving him, he was such a solid mountain kind of like, you know, person. And I had never had to do any of that. I didn't have to work. I mean, I hate to say this, but I didn't have to work that hard to get like people's attention. Do you know what I mean? And so with him, I like, it was like working really hard. And then at one point I was just like, it's not working. And then stuff would come up in me. Do you know what I mean? And then I would constantly be leaning on him, you know, because he's so solid. And that was also something like, dude, like you're leaning on me in a way that's like completely inappropriate, given that like you and I don't have that kind of relationship yet. You know, I was constantly sort of asking on some level for him to manage my nervous system. Because
Sure.
I like, hey, work out with me how I could actually be like coach me on how to be in relationship with you. You know, and he's like, yeah, I don't do friendships that way. I don't do relationships that way. I don't do anything like that. But like you and I just don't have that kind of relationship set up yet, you know? So that was good times.
I'm curious about this spot, and I want to get to where it got to, but
Which was very different.
Yeah, very different.
but I've just one, I'm wondering if you can describe a distinction here, and I'm really curious, like what the difference, you knowing this spot, how do you distinguish, and is there a distinction between, because what you described is a lot of really sort of standard fare feminine conditioning.
Yeah.
So, you know, like we all would have some version of that. So for you, where is it the standard cookie cutter feminine conditioning, and what you described as your like narcissism?
Yeah.
Where's the line there for you, or what's different, or how does that overlap?
Yeah. We can go off on a tangent on this. I think I was just talking to Ken, we were just talking about this last night.
Yeah.
Remember I said like what was the difference between like how much of it is, you know, feminine, like how much
Yeah.
We were just talking about this last night. I had worked through so much of my, I had gone to the point where no, I'm going to say it this way because I can go off on things. In relationships and in life, we get confronted by things, right? We like get a little confronted, and then we have a choice. Some of us, we have a choice between like working through that confrontation that comes up, the thing that we have to like deal with. And a lot of us don't. A lot of us are like, I'm wrong or you're wrong. And then we get into that fight, that kind of thing. I had been really, really good prior to Ken to being able to be with whatever confronts me, and sort of work through it and find a self. I got to him and I And so all that female conditioning, all the things that are like my go-to, all the things that I like, I was able to just be like, huh, look at that. That's so funny. I'm not going to choose that. I like had more choices on the menu.
Mm.
Being like, okay, yes, that's my instinct to try to like, if you're insecure about something, you go into a room where there's a lot of people and you're not 100% certain, you might like be like, oh, I'm gonna start doing that. But if like, I'm gonna go get a drink, or I'm gonna go do this, or I'm gonna be really charming, like you might do that. But I was able to feel all of those things prior to him and be like, I'm just gonna be myself.
Mhm.
Whatever conditioning I have around that, I'm actually not going to choose the conditioning. I'm just going to be myself and relax a little bit and maybe be vulnerable, maybe be whatever, just like, but I couldn't, like, I found that there was something about him that I couldn't relax, and I couldn't control. I like found myself desperately wanting to control him. And so I was like doing, and which is like classic at like, I'm so afraid of what's going on, that where I went to was like this patterning where I couldn't find my way. I couldn't even find myself inside of it. I had no self. It was much bigger than me. And all I was adaptation. And I didn't know all I was adaptation. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And maybe the conditioning, what you're talking about, like female conditioning, has overlap inside of that, where you just think, well, this is who I am, tough shit. I mean, I see a lot of women doing that, this is who I am, tough shit, like, take it or leave it. No, that's actually all manipulation and control.
Mhm.
I thought about that question, the one that Matt asked, about how much of it is female conditioning and how much of it is adaptations. And I think the more direct, now that I thought about it, and of course I thought about it as soon as the video was over, and I thought about that one question, which was, I thought, a really great question. Probably the more honest answer, or at least the one that's more thoughtful, is first, I don't really know how much is one and how much is the other. And the reason why I don't know how much is one and how much is the other is because we're in a society where we've all adapted in order to survive and to figure out how to become more powerful. Um, Women, generally speaking, are trying to figure out our relationship to what is most powerful, what has the most power over us, how do we get, because we're not in the quote powerful position. Um, and so how much of it is us being conditioned inside of that fishbowl, and then you add to that um, our own individual and collective trauma, and then so you go on the spectrum of all of that, and how much of it is one and how much of it is another. They overlap for sure, and we're all surviving for sure, and we're all either trying to figure out our own power, trying to get into relationship with the proximity of what is power in our world right now, or being in reaction to or against how powerless we feel. So that's probably a more complete response.
I wonder, Ken,
What were you going to say?
you gonna add?
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just female conditioning. What I'm going to say is true of both women and men, where there's a spectrum of objectification. So there's like there's the things a guy wants from a woman, or the things that a woman wants from a guy. And to what degree do you see that there's another human being out there? And so what I have learned from
that's separate from the person's wants. Yeah.
That's separate from the person's wants. And so what I've learned, this was all stuff that I didn't know. This is stuff that literally Anna has taught me since we've been relating with each other and since I've been with her, which is when she would often describe this experience of there being no self, especially in people with narcissistic personalities. There's no self. And so if there's no self, there's just needs, and there's just strategies to get those needs met.
Okay.
There's no self, but there's also no other human being out there. So there's no consideration of the wreckage. There's no consideration of feelings. There's just there's just a bundle of needs here and a bundle of strategies to get those needs met. There's no human being over there.
Mm.
And so with Anna, there was enough of a person inside of her that at crucial moments she was able to prioritize something other than, once it came clear that everything she was doing wasn't going to work, she didn't really have a choice other than to try some other methodology, which was to surrender and be a human being who was relating to another human being. So that's, I want to check in with Anna. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, I also had like at one point, yes, and I want to make it a little bit more like boots on the ground at one point, because I had been upfront about my own adaptations with him.
Okay, that was
Um,
gonna be my question.
I'd been upfront about it, and but at the time when I was talking about it, I was. I mean, here's like it's so amazing how the brain works and doesn't work. I was talking about my own adaptations, but was completely unaware that I was inside of the adaptation as I was talking about the adaptation, if that makes sense.
It does.
And so at one point, like the shit hit the fan, and he was like, "No, what the place you had in my heart and in my mind and whatever, you're like out. Like we're gonna have very little interaction here. Like you've lost the privilege." And I was so shocked by that. So that was the first sort of like blow. And then after that, when we had like slowed down conversations, he was like, "Do you understand? Like, can you now get?" Like kindly, he was like, "Do you see how narcissistic this is?" And I couldn't, all of a sudden I was like, and then the whole thing came, like the whole mask came down, whatever it was that I had been up against, that had been like sort of driving me like the alien on my face. And I didn't really know, all of a sudden sort of fell away. And there was like, all I was left was like, oh my God, I've been working for 20 something years inside of this. And I had no idea that I was back to square one inside of this particular circumstance. Like it was shocking and upsetting to me. And then I just like got deeply humbled, in the best way. And we started from ground zero, like all the way like up again, if that makes like brings more clarity to like what happened. And there, but like genuinely, it's only because he and I had already been connected and been talking and had a relationship that was already established, that we even got to that and were able to work through that,
Yeah.
But I wanted to go back, Ken, what were you going to say? How do you, this is purely my own curiosity that I don't know how do you see, look at that smirk. How do you see things now that you didn't, that changed?
Well, oh my God, I'm married to a human being, an amazing human being. I'm not under the spell of an alluring facade that knows how to,
Manipulate, seduce.
manipulate and like reward and punish to get me to line up with what was going on.
Mhm.
So I like, that was the thing that I had been waiting for the whole time. And it took us a while to get to where you were willing to try that with me.
Yes. But I meant like, yes, it took me a hot minute to catch up to like the reality of like, but I meant like how you had seen it and what has changed in your mind about how you now see. Do you remember what you had, Nat, you know you had said, I haven't
Yeah.
even like said to Anna yet how
Oh,
I now.
no, I said it. I said
Yeah.
it. I hadn't spoken in terms of what was missing for me.
Mm.
And that's literally how I think of it now is
Mm.
you were denying me a you that would allow me to be in relationship with you.
I see.
Yeah, I want to say something to that, especially for the people who are listening. For those who are in relationship with someone who has either NPD or BPD or SPD. Yeah, I wanted to make sure I said that right. But they're unaware. I don't want to give false hope. If the person is not in therapy, doesn't know that they have this, is like, just like, I don't know what you're talking about, is completely in denial, there's genuinely, I can't, and I don't say this unkindly, but there's just no hope. Like, you're involved with someone who essentially is, it's like if someone's a heroin addict or an alcoholic or someone, you're not involved with a person, you're involved with a person who's depending on something to survive. Um, and so you're not actually in a relationship with a person. So that is not who this conversation is speaking to. This conversation is speaking to those that are in relationship. Either you have an adaptation and you are self-aware and you're genuinely trying to make a difference in the life of your own life and in the life of the people that you're involved with, or if you're someone who's listening to this and you're involved with someone who's actually trying to make a difference for them, and how do you actually like work things out. The process of, I want to speak to this. I didn't go to seduce Ken because I'm a bad person, It's like I didn't go to him to seduce him and to charm him and to manipulate and control and and it's not just because I'm a woman, and it's not just because I've got personality. It's not any of those aren't the reasons why. And I don't say this to be like, poor me. I just want to give context for the content. Like, the context was that I had grown up inside of a circumstance where I literally, on a very, very tangible, real way, was figuring out how to survive psychologically, physically, and emotionally, like truly for my life. And the way I figured out how to do that for me, given my makeup, given what, like, the tools I had at hand, was intelligence, seduction, manipulation, and control, and throw in a bunch of other, stuff inside of there. Those tools had worked for me. I had broken through a lot of that. And even with Ken, I didn't necessarily lie. I wasn't even like, but I didn't know. And when you're someone who has a personality adaptation, the brain is something. Think about the dynamics that are going on in the world right now. People believe all kinds of stuff politically, right? And we genuinely believe the things we genuinely believe, and it doesn't really matter what comes into our space. We are convinced of that thing. And it's the same thing with someone who has a personality disorder. You are like genuinely convinced about the things that you're convinced about. You're not a bad person. You're just like, have survived and done your thing, and et cetera, et cetera. And it requires something to break through that kind of like mental gymnastics. So
yeah. So in that vein, what's been the process of, well, you had to build your own roadmap, Anna, and then in the relationship, how have you built a roadmap for Ken? Because you mentioned describing your personality adaptations to him while also being inside of it. Has that changed? Has that evolved? How's the roadmap giving been going?